Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthylicious podcast. Today, we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about fermentation. So I don't know what you know about fermentation, but it's really the most important topic you can see online today. You'll see words like kombucha, kimchi, like, for example, fermented milk, lots of things that we're going to talk about today. And you will see how you can use them at home, how you can prepare them. It's in a very simple and easy way, and how you can integrate them within your diet because they have tremendous benefit for your health. So I'm very happy to have with me today Maher Tabchi. He's an old friend of mine.
Hi.
And he's going to introduce himself to show you how he changed his life. He changed his career from something completely different into someone who really is passionate about fermentation.
Yeah.
So tell us
Cool.
a little bit about yourself.
So, hi Cynthia, good to see you again. So, my name is Maher Tabchi, and so we've known each other for a long time. I've had an international career working in CPG companies for the past 15 years plus. But the past 2 years, I found my calling into fermentation. So I opened a concept called Tabchilli after my name, Tabchi, because I thought if I give it my name, I have to go extra effort to not make it fail. But basically, Tabchilli is the first Dubai-based startup where we focus on producing fermented food. But not only that, we provide workshops and education to drive awareness on how to reduce food waste and make those probiotic-rich fermented foods available across every single household.
Amazing. Why did you have this passion with fermentation? Like, is it something personal? Did you try it at home? Do your parents or grandparents at home used to do the fermentation like, the grandparents used to do it? Why do you have this passion for fermentation?
So fermentation is a very sexy word now these days, but fermentation is actually preservation. And every single culture across the world has some sort of preserving food. So I found preservation or fermentation through, like in Lebanon, we ferment food and we preserve food from season. So when you have a winter season, you preserve food for other different seasons to maintain their freshness or extend the longevity. So I found fermentation as a young kid. Okay, I love the flavors that are sour, tangy. Sometimes some of them are umami, but eventually fermented food is actually preserving food. And after drying is the second most important way of preserving food. But I found it through my own heritage, and I really fell in love with it because most people cook with fire, right? But in fermentation, and specifically because I'm very bad in the kitchen, all you have to do is allow microbes to do the cooking for you. And not only that, they create flavors that fire cannot replicate and health benefits that usually fire kills. And that's one of the biggest impact that had for me on fermentation. And during COVID, for me was, we were at home, everything, and I used to travel excessively. But everybody has a COVID story. For me, fermentation came through. I started fermenting, experimenting more, and I found really that the food that I care about that's good for my family, for myself, for my friends, is not found in a local market because everything is processed, everything is pasteurized, nothing has a good beneficial bacteria, and the flavors I'm looking for are not there. So I'm like, why not? So as I had my full-time job, I'm going to open a fermentation store based in Dubai. Everybody thought I was crazy. But for me, it was all about how can you drive awareness and appreciation for something that's no longer there because it's slow, it's lost. And most chefs do it, but no longer at the scale that we need it for us. And maybe I'm talking too much, but we talk about pandemic, about impacting, but we have also a pandemic across GCC and many countries, which is diabetes, and we don't eat healthy. And having kids, I want them to live in a place where they have access to great food.
Exactly.
And fermented food for me is something I love. Maybe it's personal choice, but I think it's getting there, and we're talking a lot about that.
That's true. I feel also the same way. I feel that when you know more about fermented food and when you know how you can use it at home with your family, with your friends, with your kids, how it's going to improve their digestion and at the end improve their health.
Yeah.
So let's start a little bit with the basic. If we were going to talk about the basic fermentation, like everybody, because I think when they're listening to us today, there is definitely in their kitchen somewhere something that is fermented.
Yeah.
So tell us, what are the foods that are basically fermented? I know there's different kind of fermentation. And we're going to talk mainly about today the fermentation of vegetables mainly.
Yeah.
And milk.
Yeah. So I'm going to be a bit technical, hopefully not very boring. I do this in my workshops as well. But just to step back and talk about what is fermentation. So fermentation is preserving food. And if you want to think about the most important invention in our time, we think it's fire. We were hunter-gatherers, and we were using fire to actually cook the food that we were hunting. But once we stopped hunting, we started having agriculture in place. We were having so much food was going to waste. Once we understood how to preserve the food, we were feeding more people, civilizations are growing, and fire was killing the bacteria while preserving was maintaining it. And in fermenting, you have different kind of fermentation which span across all the world because you are preserving food across different cultures. So to give you some context, some historical background, we discovered leavened bread 4000 BC in Egypt. People think sauerkraut is coming from Germany, but historically fermented cabbage evidence was found in China. When they were building the Great Wall of China, a couple of thousands BC, they had so much people to feed that they were actually feeding rice fermented cabbage. We think of fermented fish like fish sauce or other kind of cured fish is coming from the Nordics because they didn't have much Greenland. And eventually you talk about milk. The countries were fermenting more milk or by-processes. So when we talk about fermenting milk, you get cheeses, yogurts, that's fermented milk. So you got North America, Europe, Australia, where you have husbandries. You had so many cows and sheep. So they're actually trying to find ways to utilize the milk. If you go to Asia, you have rice, they make sake. You have soya, they make soybeans, they make miso. So every single culture had different kind of food, and everything can be fermented. You talk about meat, to make beef garum or to cure meat, fish sauce is fermented. Exactly. So I'm just saying the word of fermentation, of course, bread and sourdough is so huge that everything can be fermented. And everything in our cupboards was fermented, but now is more commercialized. So they're using flavoring, artificial shelf enhancers, which is losing the health benefits, which are usually the probiotics which are found.
Exactly. Let's start with the basic of fermentation, as you were saying. We were discussing, you and me, before we started. I told you that some people, they add to their fermentation vinegar sometimes. They add different kind of salt. They add different kind of flavoring. So tell us, because I heard as well that the basic of fermentation is only the brine. So it's only water and salt.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about this so we can understand what happens during the basic fermentation and what happens and why the vegetables can stay longer.
Okay. So when my mom found out, like, I'm opening a pickling store, and not leaving my career, she's like, yeah, ibni, like my sham tamul. So anyway, just to give the nuance between pickling and fermenting, what's the difference? So they are both used to preserve food because you use vinegar to extend shelf life of food products. Let's take an example of cucumber, which is one of the most commonly household things that we have across the world. When you take water, and you put vinegar and you put a cucumber, what you're doing is that you're extending shelf life, but in 2-3 days, you're going to have the sour, tangy flavor that cucumbers are known for. And they taste everywhere across the world, great on burgers or hot dogs. They might have different textures. Now, fermented cucumbers on a different part is different. You use water and you put salt, as you were mentioning, but you put some spices. Now, what's the catch? It takes a longer time to get the flavor. You don't get one sour flavor. You get more flavors. But only 0.1% of vinegar. So if you think about it, water and vinegar, if you dilute them together, you use them to bleach, to clean a table.
Exactly.
So once you put vinegar in any product, you're killing the bacteria to give it shelf life. So in fermenting, you don't kill the bacteria, you allow them to thrive. That's the bacteria we call probiotics, which are available there. Once you put 1% of vinegar, you kill it. And that's kind of the difference between fermenting and pickling. They both taste good, they do both nutritional, but one of them will be preferred by your gut, which is fermenting.
Exactly. So here I just want to say something that when we talk about probiotics, it's a big word, as you said now. We can produce our own probiotics in a very cheap way, easy way at home. And as you said, pickling or, for example, fermenting the cucumbers is one of the easiest way, is something that we have and we can do in our kitchens. Definitely, we're going to discuss with you some small top tips that you can give us in order to do it at home. And I know that also you do your own trainings. We're going to talk also about that. So definitely, I would say, give us a little bit more information about the different types of fermented foods. So we start with pickles. How about if we talk about kimchi, we talk about sauerkraut. So what are these vegetables and how do you basically ferment them?
I'm going to go very technical on this, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think I just want to address two things, okay? So first, many people who come to see me, so when I opened Tabchilli, for me, it was, the mission was health than flavor, okay? Because the flavor is something that you control individually because it's your own ferment. Now, to your question, what are the types of fermented foods we can do? The first to understand, there are two kinds of fermentation. There's something we call wild fermentation or spontaneous fermentation, and one we call cultured fermentation. What's the difference? So if you want to make kimchi, sauerkraut, or pickles, usually you use salt. So you put the brine solution, or you just dry rub the cabbages with salt. And then you let the bacteria do all the magic to create the flavor naturally. So it's called spontaneously. But cultured fermentation, you need a starter. For example, to make sourdough, you need a sourdough starter, you need yeast. Yeah. To make kombucha, you need a SCOBY. To make water kefir or milk kefir, you need kefir grains. So two different kinds of fermentation. One of them needs starters, and one of them can be done naturally. And vegetable fermentation is one of the easiest way to start because you only require salt and water and no need for a starter. And that's one of the basics we are doing everywhere. And each one of them has different flavors that you can play with. But basically, as a rule of thumb, everything can be fermented, and it only depends on your flavor profile.
Okay, I see. And after fermentation, you can add any flavor you want. I know that when we talk about fermentation, we talk that it's actually the bacteria that is available in the vegetable where you grow the vegetable that will give you the final product. So let's say you do a kimchi in your kitchen, I do one in my kitchen. They're not definitely the same because I have a different kind of vegetable that I put inside coming from a different place. So from where do you get usually your vegetables to do the fermentation?
For us, everything is locally produced because we reduce the carbon footprint. So we use local producers. And we use sometimes something we call ugly vegetables because in fermenting, we don't need the most beautiful looking vegetable. I just take the one that's going to be discarded and we re-ferment it because fermentation can actually support food waste. But you mentioned something about bacteria, and I hated bacteria in school. They made me fail my chemistry exams, my biology exams all the way to university. Now I talk about them a lot.
I work with bacteria.
Yes, I work with bacteria. I praise them and they make my products taste good. Just to clarify, bacteria and how they work. So you have something we call vegetable fermentation, lactofermentation, or lactic acid fermentation. That's because they rely on a specific bacteria called lactobacillus. It's one of those 10 billion bacteria available everywhere. And she's responsible to create the sour flavor that yogurt is known for, pickles are known for, but also to create the longevity and to create that ecosystem where it's shelf stable. So it's one of the bacteria, and why we call it art of fermentation, not science. It is science, but when they come to my workshops, I tell everybody, you might have the same recipe of kimchi, but you're playing with different conditions because fermenting, you control different variables. One, the bacteria might be different because you're allowing them naturally to come there. You're not selecting which ones will go in, so you're not the bouncer, okay? Second, you play with time and temperature. Temperature can affect the growth rate of the bacteria because, you know, if it's too cold, like a freezer, bacteria sleep. If you put them at 4 degrees, they make a few babies. If you put them at a higher temperature, you know, if you go very high pasteurization, you kill them. So temperature is a parameter you control as an individual in fermentation. And the third one is time. Time creates flavor. So for example, wine, it's a 2-week fermentation process. But why do we wait a year or two? Because you're aging it to allow the flavors. Cheese, it's probably a 3-day fermentation process. But why we wait 3 years to eat it? Bread, it's a 48 hours, sometimes 72 hours fermentation process. Everything depends on the flavor you want to cultivate and the flavor develops. If you go towards Asia, Southeast Asia, for example, miso, a traditional Japanese staple food available, they are fermented for 2 years or 3 years. But you can have also a 6 months miso. But that creates a flavor. So in a broad sense, I don't want to let our viewers get overwhelmed with information. Fermentation is individual. Vegetable fermentation is the easy way to start. You only have to understand how to create the safe conditions to do any kind of fermentation.
Exactly. And since you're talking about that, what tips can you give us about the basic fermentation? I don't know, when you talk about basic, do we talk about sauerkraut, for example?
Sauerkraut is a very basic fermentation one. So we produce sauerkraut, and everybody who is not from the Middle East, from Europe, they know sauerkraut because it's very available across Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and usually from the cold countries because eventually most cold countries, they were fermenting their produce to last seasons. That's how fermentation started. Sauerkraut is very easy to make. So what's sauerkraut? It's actually fermented cabbage. What does that mean? It's cabbage. You apply salt to it and then you massage it and you break that cabbage barrier with it, and you let the salt draw out liquid to create the liquid and to create the anaerobic environment. Because fermentation, I hope I'm not losing everybody, but fermentation means bacteria's surviving and breathing and developing the flavor in a place where there's no oxygen. So you need the cabbage to be under the water.
Exactly.
So to make sauerkraut, very super easy, guys. If you have a cabbage now in the fridge, take it out. If it's 1 kg, just put 2% salt, put it on it. Make sure you use those shoulders, massage it, break it down, let it be oozy, juicy. Take it in a jar, pack it in a sterilized jar, and just make sure the water of the cabbage flow over it, close it, and wait a couple of weeks or 7 days, and it should be okay.
Now, how do you control the temperature in your shop? You have a controlled environment. What's the best temperature that you should use?
That's a good question. So at Tabchilli, my shop. So at Tabchilli, basically, we are HACCP certified, and definitely for me, because you're producing fermented food, which requires lots of quality controls. We measure temperature and monitor because it's part of the flavoring profile. We have a specific setting where we have humidity controls and temperature controls, which affect the ferments, but we control it all the time. So we have different checks throughout the day and throughout the week on our process. But what is the best temperature? So temperature dictates flavor. For example, if you're in the winter season and you're making sauerkraut, let's say you're in Europe, your kitchen is not going to be warm.
Yes.
It's going to be colder than most of the different rooms. So let's say it's 15, 16 degrees. It might take maybe 6 weeks to get the flavor profile of sauerkraut.
Okay.
But if you're in summer, it's going to be maybe 21, 24 degrees, 25 degrees. You wait a shorter time. The best temperature for fermenting vegetables can be between 18 to 25 degrees, but it's very subjective on the time. Because to think about it, your job when you're fermenting is actually to allow the bacteria to thrive. So you're a custodian. If it's too hot, they go up quickly, but you might lose on flavor. So really it's very individual, but usually as a rule of thumb, room temperature is a good place to start.
Something we didn't mention before about bacteria is that because of the acidity of the salt, about the brine, and when you put the vegetable, the pH goes really low. And
Correct.
at this pH, this is where only the healthy bacteria will grow.
Correct.
So we should not be scared about eating fermented food as long as they're done in good settings, right?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the first thing I talk about is safety and food safety, because people think, I'm doing kombucha, I'm doing different kind of things, I'm allowing things, because fermenting is actually controlled rot. You're allowing the food texture to change over time, but you're controlling it not to spoil. So if you take cabbage, you put it in water, it rots. You put 2% salt, it becomes sauerkraut. So what's the catch? So the catch is lactobacillus, this bacteria we're talking about, she's responsible for acidity. She likes to consume sugar, and she likes salt, man. Once you give her a bit of salt, she goes on turbocharge. Every time the bacteria consumes sugar, she has a poison called lactic acid. The more she eats, the more lactic acid builds up. So the pH naturally drops from 7 to below 4. Why is it important? From a food safety perspective, probably you know as well more than me, everything below 4 is deemed safe to eat. Why? Because botulism, salmonella, E. coli, those bad bugs we don't see cannot survive there. And that's why fermented food can last for a long time, because the pH is so low that bad bugs cannot come there. Maybe texture might change or flavor might be off, but it's still edible.
And this is why also, let's make it a bit more clear. When, let's say, we get the fermented vegetable and then we take it at home, how can we store it for a long time?
So, two things. This is one of the biggest things. People assume that if you see sauerkraut on a shelf, it's fermented. If you see sauerkraut not in a fridge, it's probably not fermented. Why? Because if it's at ambient temperature, a temperature where the bacteria usually keep on growing, it cannot be closed, because if it's in a pouch, it's going to bloat because the CO2 build up from the bacteria. So you have to have it from the fridge. So if you're buying a commercial fermented food like us, for example, in Tabchilli, we have our sauerkraut is refrigerated. Why we refrigerate? It's not because to make it more safe, because once we like the flavor we know, we put in the fridge, because the fridge, the coldness drops the temperature and locks the flavor. So we can transport it without a fridge, but the flavor might change over time. So I recommend to you, if you got it at fridge refrigerated, keep it refrigerated, because this is a flavor that is locked for you. That's the flavor we know. or you can keep it to ferment.
And you can keep it in the fridge up to a year, I think, right?
Yeah, so of course it depends. So for example, for us, everything is Dubai municipality approved. We had our shelf tests across all our products because we want to make sure it gets not best before 3 weeks, but quality control, because I want to beat everything pasteurized. So we can get up to a year, but eventually I say fermented food can last as long in the fridge as long as you don't eat it.
Yeah, 100%. I believe the same way. Because the bacteria are growing extremely slow.
Exactly.
And that's why if you keep it in good condition, you can keep it for a long time.
You're not, of course, there are some visual cues you should look out for, like mold or this, but it depends on what you are using. But usually one of the biggest inhibitor of growth of bad bacteria is salt.
Yeah.
If you have something salted good enough, it should not allow bad bugs to grow. For example, I'm going to talk about not vegetables, but if you talk about miso or fish sauce, for example, or any kind of protein-based ferment, okay? Usually, if you want to do a short ferment, for example, if you make miso, which is soybeans fermented in barrels with mold, if you put 6% salt, it's maybe for 6 months. But if you put double that salt, like 15% of salt on the weight of the medium, you can ferment for 2 years because the salt inhibits the bad bugs of coming in. Of course. So this is how, as well, you can play if you want to play with different kind of ferments, because everything can be fermented. Salt ratio as well helps you maintain things for a long time.
Amazing. So even if you talked about it, I want to just mention it one more time. How can we know how to choose the best product when we're in the supermarket? What should we read on the product when we're buying definitely fermented food? How do we know if it's pasteurized, not pasteurized? How do we know if it's the best one for us? Because I understand that when a fermented food is pasteurized, you're killing most of the active bacteria that you've been working on for so long.
Correct.
So how can we help our listener or people who are watching us to choose the best?
I want to show my product, but it's like I'm marketing my product, but, but it's not, because my product is the same as many products across the world. So we claim unpasteurized, alive.
So you need to read on the package live.
So it means alive is still fermenting. So if you look at the package, first of all, the number of ingredients. So for example, if I look at my packaging, just without being biased, sauerkraut, 2 ingredients, cabbage and salt. There's no pasteurization, no artificial, and it's written fermented.
Okay, Maher, so tell us a little bit what to look for when we're looking at a product, because what's best is to choose a good product for us, right?
Correct.
We have people watching us from all over the world, so it's good for them to understand how to choose the best fermented food.
So just to clarify, because fermented foods has flavors, but it depends what you're looking for. Okay, so if you're looking something which has probiotics or the alive bacteria, usually you should look for them in the fridge. That's the first step. Why? Because the fridge is where you have the pouches or the products that are available, but the fermentation process is still there, but it's slow. Okay, that's number one. And two, then you have sometimes it's written on different labels. Like for example, on our label, I'm not sure if you can zoom here, but we're written raw, alive, unpasteurized, widely fermented. So we're allowing the natural process. We're talking about what process we use, and as well probiotic rich. Okay. So eventually those are things that you look for, but the number one I think thing is, if you look at the product, you say fermented or sauerkraut, which you assume by its name is fermented. Yes, it has the flavor profile you're looking for, but if you look at the label, if it's written pasteurized, okay, it means that doesn't have probiotics. If something has vinegar as well or different kind of artificial additives, you're not looking at something that's widely fermented. Eventually, this is one of the things, if you go to Europe or the US, you find those products alive, raw culture, just to make sure they are giving you the confidence that you're buying the real stuff. Everything, I don't want to say that the others are not good. I'm
but
just
these are
saying,
better.
If you wanted to make a choice by something that you might do at home, but you can't find, you have to buy it, that would be something that's probably made for you to eat at home.
Okay, amazing. We didn't talk about the benefits of fermented food. You talk a little bit in the beginning. Let's summarize what are the benefits, and I will also help you with talking about how much I admire fermented food for gut health and for nutrition.
So, So in Tabchilli, we sell fermented vegetables, and we sell also fermented hot sauce, but we also sell fermented starters, fermentation starters and cultures, like how to make fermented drinks, kombucha, water kefir, milk kefir, and we sell all those starters, and we teach people how to make also their own vinegars. So everything that can be reduced through food waste, how to utilize them. Now, the benefits, I'm not a licensed nutritionist like yourself to really mention to people, because most of my customers who are coming, which I'm very happy and pushed me to really push forward Tabchilli, are people who are looking for the health benefits. They buy Tabchilli. Okay, we have, I think, good flavor, guys, but I think they buy me first for the health benefits of the probiotics they're looking for. So if you look at the different probiotics and what's the difference between prebiotics and probiotics, I'm sure many of us don't know, but I wanted to explain to people in a simple way. So prebiotics are those, don't correct me in front of everybody, but are those high fiber rich vegetables we consume to feed our gut with the probiotics. But for me to put it in a simple term, I say prebiotics is Luigi, probiotics is Mario, Robin and Batman. This guy's sidekick. And probiotics are those bacteria that we care about in our gut. So you have a bacteria called lactobacillus. It's a bacteria also found in the colon and the vagina as a good probiotic in our gut that sometimes we are buying as a supplement. But it's also found in sauerkraut and vinegars and kombucha. Okay, if you talk about bifidobacterium, it's also a good probiotic. It's also found and sold over the counters and just to feed your microbiome. But it's also found as well in kefir, milk kefir, and sauerkraut, and even different kind of wines, Saccharomyces as well. So when you look at the bacteria that are probiotics, they're also found in fermented food, and that's why consuming them in moderation. I get lots of questions. Maher, how much do we consume sauerkraut? How much kombucha? I never answer them because I'm not licensed to answer them. But all I say is that, like everything, in moderation, it's just about having a balanced diet. And if it's something that you like as a flavor, why not? Like for me, if I talk about my morning routine is sourdough bread, fermented, cheese, a nice strong cheddar cheese. Then I put some kimchi on it. Then I put my hot sauce, fermented. Then I close it and I just let it rip on the sep, on the swan. That's all fermented. And then I finish my kids' cereals.
Let me complete what you said is beautiful about the gut health. And today we're talking a lot about the importance of gut health. Why? Because all this microbiome that is in our gut, it's like all the mix of the good and bad bacteria, right? And today with the food that we're eating, all the processed American food, fast food, all of these additives that we're eating, they're actually killing the good bacteria in our digestive system. Yep. And what happens is that we have something called a leaky gut. What does that mean, a leaky gut? It means that the barrier in our intestine becomes so fragile because of all this food that we eat, because of all the antibiotics that we take as well. And all of this will lead to a leakage of the food in our blood system. And this can cause a tremendous big amount of problems like headaches, eczema. It's not the only cause, but it's a big major cause. Yep. And then you have headaches, you have eczema, you have problems with weight loss, you have problem with food sensitivities. You find yourself, you're not digesting properly anymore. You eat bread, you don't digest. You drink milk, you don't digest anymore. So you have more of these issues. Yeah. And that's why it always comes back to the gut and healing the gut. And I feel that fermented food, and I really know that it will help because it's a probiotics available at home that you can take to help you with the digestion. Yeah. And on another note, there is no guidelines actually to how much we should take. You are someone who got used to taking probiotics. So definitely you can take as much as you enjoy. But for someone who is starting, we always advise with 1 to 2 servings per day. Yeah. What is a serving? It's like a cup of kefir, a cup of kombucha, 2 tablespoons of kimchi, 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut. So you can start gradually, so your body can adjust to that without having, a little bit of bloating, etc. And this is how you feed the good bacteria. And I think this is where you can start, and then you can add up as much as you want.
Yeah, and everything you're saying about how, so for me, it was a personal mission for me to spread fermented foods. It's one of the most complicated topic to drive awareness on. It's one of the most complicated food to drive adoption on. I could have opened a cookie store and sold more than what I'm selling now. You have to educate consumers on acquiring the taste for fermented food because it's sour and tangy. You have to educate the consumer on how to consume it, on how to integrate it in daily life. And then you have to educate the consumer it's safe to eat because it's raw.
Yeah.
But the benefits of this awareness outweighs the challenges I face. Because for me, I was in a summit, I was invited to Abu Dhabi Global Healthcare Week, talking in a longevity clinic, and they were pioneering longevity here in Abu Dhabi. They were talking about longevity. So longevity is preventive medicine. So how can you increase your biological age and lifespan? It's all about healthy exercises, but also healthy eating. And today, very surprisingly, I had once a person, she came over to my shop and she was funded, she was in NYU, US, and she's working on a big work on paper And she was NYU US, NYU and Abu Dhabi, and she went to Shanghai. And her research was to show that the gut in Dubai is the same gut as in Shanghai and same gut as in New York, because we're all eating processed food. We don't have a diversified microbiome.
Exactly.
And that's where, because most, like I know, Healthy Delicious, you focus on great quality food, but not everybody has that health conscious to give. They think cost, they think process, they think mass, which is profitability eventually, but at the expense of health. And now there's big awareness. And you mentioned in the beginning that people are talking microbiome. 2 years ago, I was talking fermented. I tell them my hot sauce fermented for 3 months. For optimal probiotics, they don't know. Why do I spend 3 months making a hot sauce? My kimchi takes maybe 12 days. My sauerkraut, 24 to 27 days to make sauerkraut for you. I can put it in salt and water and vinegar and give it to you and tell you it's fermented. But I'm lying. I have to follow the right process to give it for you. And that's the love of passion that I do. And that's what you mentioned. It's so important to understand that fermented food can really help you shift your gut to a better way of living.
Exactly. And one more thing before we end, something very interesting. You gave us the idea about how you include the fermented food with your breakfast. Give us some idea, because you work with different chefs, right? You do all these trainings. Give us an idea how we can incorporate different kinds of fermented food within our daily routine.
Okay, so first of all, people, like maybe I look fit, people think I eat fermented food a lot, but I also have my cheat days, maybe 6 days a week, okay, where I just eat lots of processed food.
And you also exercise.
But it's eventually balance. So let me give you, so the things that you can make at home are fermenting vegetables, easy place to start. But let's say you want to diversify your food offering, what you can do. So fermenting vegetables is quite enough easy. You can make pickles. You can make any leftover chopped legumes like cucumbers, carrots, cauliflower, turnips. You can put them in a jar with salt, wait 5-6 days. You have those fermented you can use as toppings with your charcuterie board or your knife board. You can also make your very basic sauerkraut as cabbage and salt. It might take time, but probably you will forget the jar is going to be good. You can use it as in a bowl, on a salad, on a side dish with your chicken, your steak, or your rice for kimchi, for example. Now, when it comes to drinks, which is much more easier to integrate, you have 3 kind of drinks which I think I recommend people to start with. One is called water kefir. So what's water kefir? Kefir is actually a sort of small granules. It's like a small bacteria. You just put them as a starter with water and sugar, and after 24 hours, 48 hours, it becomes yeasty smell. But what you do, you put any leftover overripe fruits like strawberries and this, you close it, it becomes fizzy, alternative to soda, lower than 5% of sugar, we can drink.
Okay.
Then you have milk kefir. Milk kefir, like my kids, they're 7 and 5, and for me to get them to try fermented food is hard because they don't have the sour notes. So milk kefir is very sour, right? It's very easy to make. All you need, you can buy milk kefir from a supermarket, dude, but to pay that much for milk kefir is expensive. If you buy from me, for example, I sell the water milk kefir granules. It just costs you maybe 100 dirhams, but that's for all your life and generations to come. So you put 5 grams of those milk kefir grains, you put them in milk. After 24 hours, you have milk kefir, sour milk. Wow. You can take that sour milk. In the morning, you can make a smoothie. Instead of using milk, put 100 ml milk kefir, put your strawberries, your bananas, blend it, give it to your kids, give it to yourself. It's a nice, refreshing smoothies, has all the benefits plus very good probiotics. Amazing. That's one thing. And also you can make your cheeses. If you accidentally leave it for 3 days, you have cheese. Okay. So you don't lose on anything. Then you have something, there's the craze on kombucha. And there's many good kombucha brands out there, but I only believe that the best kombucha is the one you make, period. Because it's your flavor. It's very easy to make. There's a barrier thinking, kombucha is difficult. It just needs a bit of time, but just 1 hour to just trial it. You can make kombucha every day. Okay. And that's enough for you to try it. And plus, what's cool about kombucha, if you leave it, it's like, oh man, it's like 12 days, or you miss that window, it becomes like vinegar. So you can use it as a salad dressing. So I don't want to complicate the information, but fermenting vegetables is easy to start because you're using them on a daily basis. Then if you want to integrate, if you don't bake or sourdough, for example, you want to integrate something more exotic for us, like milk kefir or water kefir or kombucha, they're kind of easy to make. All it takes for fermentation is to start.
Yes.
once you try it once, you understand how the bacteria will work. Like my Instagram, our Instagram and Tabchilli, which I reply to, my WhatsApp is all pictures. Is this safe? Is this safe? Is this safe? And voice notes. And I love mentoring. We had maybe 1,000 people attend our workshops across last year, which is great. I love sharing my knowledge and passion because I'm sharing my experience fermenting.
Yeah.
But you never know how to ferment until you start.
And tell us a little bit before we end about your workshops. Like, what kind of workshop do you do for someone who would like just to start? And, what different things we can learn?
Okay. So, lots of fermentation today. So, in Tabchilli, we do forecast. So, in the beginning, I had a full-time job, so I was limited to the amount of workshops I was giving. So I do 4 kinds of workshops. So the first one is vegetable fermentation, where you learn how to make your sauerkraut, kimchi, and hot sauce. But it's not about what you learn as a product. I teach you how to ferment any kind of vegetables using 3 different techniques, something we call dry salting, brining, and those. It's the first base to start. That's fermenting vegetables and fruits. Then it's usually 2.5 hours long. You come in, you get all the tips and tricks, you get all the gadgets, and plus you take everything.
And it's hands-on. You do it actually.
It's very hands-on. So we spend 1 hour cleaning every workshop. And it smells like kimchi for a day because everybody's making kimchi. I never say that. I don't mind, guys. Keep on coming. Okay. Second one is we do fermented drinks. How to make kombucha, water kefir, and your vinegars. So I teach and I share my knowledge. So first of all, everybody comes to the workshop, they leave with their own starter. So I have a very bad business model because I give everybody my recipes and everything my starters. So it's like I see them once and that's it. But that for me, they're driving awareness and they're driving that, which is good for the category as a whole and for me, for my mission to drive this awareness. So they learn how to make kombucha and how to use a starter to make water kefir and how to also make their cheap vinegar. Because vinegar usually takes a long time. In 3 weeks, you can have vinegar. So that's one. We also do one on how to ferment milk to make milk kefir and to make your basic cheeses as well, like ricotta cheese, labneh, or even your milk kefir cheese, and also how to make your sourdough starter. And the last course, which is more advanced, is how to use mold, koji. Koji is Aspergillus oryza. It's a mold that's used in Japan and Asia to make their miso, their soy sauce, and that's also a beautiful next level game of fermentation.
Amazing. One more question for you. When we were at your shop the other day, you told us that there is kombucha with alcohol and kombucha without alcohol. Can you tell us the difference and how do you make them?
So basically, what's alcohol? So alcohol is fermented.
Yes.
Okay. So because in kombucha and different kind of ferments, there's always a trace of alcohol because Saccharomyces, one of the bacteria responsible to producing alcohol, is also there. So in a kombucha process, naturally, okay, you have traces of alcohol, but depends on when you drink the kombucha. So the alcohol content is not above 1%. Usually by, I think, Dubai municipality, everything should be below 0.5 ABV, okay, to be considered non-alcoholic. But sometimes in kombucha, it can be between 0.5 to 1. And that depends on how much sugar you put and when did you start drinking the kombucha? Because the kombucha is a time, it takes maybe 10 days to get kombucha. So maybe day 3, day 4, you have alcohol. Because how it works, just to not bore you with details. So eventually, kombucha is made of tea and sugar.
Yes.
And a starter. The starter liquid are the bacteria hungry for sugar. Once you put them in a medium, they start consuming the sugar. And as a byproduct, the sugar creates
sugar
alcohol. So as the sugar is being consumed, because it's not infinite, it's finite, the alcohol content starts dropping down.
Okay.
So it depends when you harness it.
Okay, amazing. So for me, I really asked all the questions I really wanted to know more about. If you have anything to say before we end?
I think, first of all, thank you very much. I've always wanted to have this conversation. I remember when I first started Cynthia, I called you up. I'm like,
yes.
Hey, dude, how much probiotics should I put and everything else? So I remember my first conversation starting this journey. So being here after almost 2 years and talking about how the business grew, it's very good for me. And thank you very much for opening this platform. And I think what you're doing as well with Healthylicious, healthy conscious about the food you are driving and how the quality you're driving as well, and probably integrating fermented food as well soon in your menus is something definitely that everybody could benefit from.
Thank you so much, Maher. Thank you for being with us today. I really hope that you enjoyed this session today. We talked about different things, but if you really listen to the end, you're going to benefit on how to include the probiotics in your diet, how to include fermented foods, and I'm sure that this is a good way to start for everybody, because when you all come to do any kind of weight loss or you want to change something in your life, the most important thing is to start with eating healthy, start with small things, and especially take care of your gut. So thank you for watching us today and hope to see you soon.